Yeah, hello everyone. My name is Yang. I'm a senior technical support engineer. I've been working with Qlik for 7 years, and my recent main focus area is integration. Today, we're going to talk about Qlik NPrinting APIs. This is the agenda for today's session. First, we're going to have an overview of the APIs, the definitions, what can they do, what can they not do, those kind of things. Then we will see some applications where NPrinting APIs are being used. After that, we will look at two examples to demonstrate how the NPrinting APIs can be used. So together with the demo, we will also look at those things that can go wrong and how you can detect them. Then in the end, we will summarize the session with some key takeaways. All right, let's have a look at the overview of the NPrinting. So what are the NPrinting APIs? Qlik NPrinting APIs are a bunch of REST API endpoints exposed by Qlik NPrinting server. It enables external programs to implement a subset of NPrinting features, such as some administrative functions, and also create on-demand reports. So the APIs was firstly introduced in NPrinting version 17.2 as the API version 0.1.0. And later on, more capabilities were added in the June and September 2017 release as the API version as the API version 0.4.0. Now let's look at what can NPrinting APIs do. The APIs enables you to implement most of the features that can be done from the NPrinting web console. For example, you can list apps, connections, reports, tasks, and so on. You can trigger metadata reload. You can trigger report generation, task execution, etc. Or you can even create new filters, group users, and roles using the APIs. However, there are some things available from the NPrinting web console that you cannot do from NPrinting APIs yet. For example, you cannot create a new NPrinting app or connection, or you cannot create new report templates through APIs. You cannot create a new task through APIs, or you cannot create new user securities, or you cannot add engines or modifying the license. Those kind of things is not enabled yet for you to do through APIs. For the latest and detailed information, please refer to the API reference on the Qlik help site. So here's a link for the help page where you can find the reference menu. Now, let's look at some applications where NPrinting APIs are being used. So there are several applications where the APIs are being used. The first application we have is a QlikView NPrinting on-demand module. Since NPrinting version 17.2.2, there is a module available from qlik.com for you to download. It enables the user to create on-demand report against NPrinting from QlikView. So once it has been configured properly, you can find this circle, this on-demand icon showing in the red circle that's being activated from the QlikView access point. Now the user can use that icon to generate self-service on-demand report. So for more information about how to set up and use the NPrinting on-demand module for QlikView, there's a quick tutorial video on Qlik help site. Here is the link you can find. You can also check one of our previous Technical Thursday session recording. That one is particularly talking about NPrinting on-demand module for QlikView. So I have listed the link for that also. It is also available from YouTube, by the way. All right, so another application where the NPrinting APIs are being used is on-demand NPrinting extensions for Qlik Sense. So this third-party Qlik Sense extension is available from Qlik branch. You can find it there. This extension enables you to create on-demand report from Qlik Sense against NPrinting, but NPrinting June and June 2017 release and the newer release. So this extension is utilizing NPrinting APIs for all its functionalities. So we will have a closer look of this extension later on in the demo section. If you want to find more information, you can use the following link to find the extension from Qlik branch on GitHub. So there's also a tutorial video for you to have a quick start. I just put the YouTube link there as well for your reference. And the last, beyond these ready-made implementations, NPrinting APIs can be simply easily integrated into your code, or it can be invoked from any REST tools, since it's just pure REST APIs, right? So soon we will look at a script example in the demo section, just to show you how easy you can trigger an NPrinting task from a JavaScript. And also later on in the troubleshooting section, we will use a REST tool called Postman for showing you how you can diagnose the or troubleshooting the API calls between the client and server. As I said before, so all the detailed information of APIs are being found from the API reference manual. You can find it from the Qlik help site. So please check it when you are using the API endpoint and during your implementation. And by the way, there are also a few projects using NPrinting APIs. They are like Qlik branch projects. You can use them. Just check them for you to have some examples as well. All right. So now let's have take a deeper look of some examples. So in front of you is a Qlik Sense app with NPrinting on-demand extension configured and embedded there. So it's this button. With this extension, the user can easily generate NPrinting report based on your current selection. Let's go to the edit mode. So if you click this generate report button, the on-demand API request will be sent to the NPrinting server, and the report generation with your current selection will be started. Let's have a look. So to get out. For now, I will make some selections to make my data more relevant for my report. First, I will make a selection from the month. Let's choose the month from January to April, and I will choose one state from United States. Now the data has changed with my selection. So if I click this button, you will see there's a pop-up dialog coming out and showing you a report generation is ongoing. So if I click it, when I click this button, there was a post request, on-demand request sent to the NPrinting server. So, and when you see the status was spinning, that was actually another get API get request to monitoring the status of the report generations and give you the feedback. So now the report generation has been finished. If I click this button, I can download that report and I can open it. And you see the report has been generated with the selection I've made in the Qlik Sense app. So in this way, you are making an on-demand report from the Qlik Sense app. Let's close this one. From this extension, you can even define different report format using this new report button. You just need to pick up a report you want to create, and then you have all the available format for that report to choose. You can choose the doc, the Word, or PDF from there. So everything behind those functionalities are made through NPrinting APIs. Okay, so that's about Qlik Sensor extension for NPrinting on demand. The next example, I'm going to show you something just to demonstrate how easy you can invoke NPrinting APIs from your own program. Let's open up another browser tab, not this one, that one. All right. So in front of you is a very simple HTML page with JavaScript embedded in it. And there's a button in this page. By clicking this button, it will trigger an NPrinting task that has been already created on the NPrinting server side. This page will also keep monitoring the task execution once it has been triggered until the status change to complete. Then it will finish the demo. And the code behind this page, it looks like this. So in the JavaScript section of this HTML file, you will find some key elements. So the first key element is this task ID. So this is the task ID predefined in the on the NPrinting server side. And this is the task we're going to trigger with this script. Where you can find this task ID, by the way. You can find it, the easy way you can find it is from the NPrinting web console. Here I have the web console. You can go to task, publish task, find the task you want to trigger. Once you get in there, you see from the URL, you will have a long GUID. And this GUID is the task ID you want to use. You can simply just copy this one and put it into your code. Or there's another way to get all the task ID in your NPrinting system, because we have an API endpoint called /tasks. If you trigger a GET request to that, you will simply list all the available tasks for you. Okay. So that's about the definition. And the next block, important block, is for the authentication. So once the page has been loaded, the JavaScript will send in the HTTP GET request to do the authentication on the NPrinting server side. And this is the request it's going to use for doing the authentication. Since currently the NPrinting server only support NTLM for the authentication method, so in order to do that, you will need to have a user that can use NTLM authentication on your NPrinting server to fulfill this request. And as needed, also the XHR field header needs to set to be true in order for the JavaScript client can keep the NTLM token during the communication. So after the communication, when the button is clicked, we will send another HTTP post request for triggering the task that we have seen the task ID before. We'll trigger that task, and this is the request you're going to send. So when you have done, when the post request has been triggered correctly, and the next block here is keep monitoring the status of the task execution, you need to parse the task execution ID from the response of this post request. Then you will put into your next HTTP GET request using both task ID and your execution ID. In this way, you're going to query the NPrinting server and get the execution status of that task. Here I put this block of code into a loop using a JavaScript set interval. So it will send a request I define here every 500 milliseconds, and it will repeat 200 times. So within this time frame, I will keep requesting the task execution status and parse the response from this request until I got a status called completed. Then the whole demo is finished. If I don't get this status back within 200 times, then I will simply print out an error message in the console, say timeout. So that's about the code you can see from here. Now let's take a look of the execution, how it looked like from the execution. I'll go back to that page. So this is a page we are going to use. In order for you to see more information, I'm going to enable the Chrome Developer Tool so we can see what is actually happening behind this page. By the way, if you press F12, you will just call this tool out, and you will see a lot of information. Here in the network panel, you will see all the network traffic from your client to the server. I need to refresh my page so that you see what actually happening before I open this tool. So once I refresh it, you see actually this page has been loading several resources, and there's already a HTTP request sent out, which is the authentication request. And from the status, you can see it's actually a successful status. Now let's click this button and see what's going to happen. You see that it print out the status say task started, and there's an execution ID fetched, and now this program is trying to monitoring the execution status. Currently, it's still in the running, and now it found completed and everything finished. So this is that's it. What I want to demonstrate with showing you the code, and this is a very simple example. You can do more complicated thing, or whatever thing with the API into your code very easily. All right. So in order for you to successfully utilize the NPrinting API in your code or in any tools, there are several prerequisites you need to pay attention in the configuration first. So first is the authentication. Since the NPrinting requests the anti-LAM authentication only for whatever client using its APIs, the user who initialized the API call must be a Windows domain user or a local Windows user of NPrinting server. So on this server, on this machine, I have installed my NPrinting server. And on this server, I have a bunch of users that I'm probably going to use during this session. So you see a bunch of domain users here and one local Windows user here. It doesn't have to be in any group, though. It just needs to be the Windows user available for this Windows server of NPrinting. So these Windows users also need to be linked to the NPrinting users. You can do that from the NPrinting console. Let's see where you can find them. So you go to the console, you go to admin, and you go to users. And here you see I have a bunch of NPrinting users that in the if you open one of them in the configuration of domain account, you just link the user to the Windows user to that NPrinting user. Then you can use Windows anti-LAM authentication for that particular user. And second thing is the connection. Actually, the NPrinting server needs to know who is actually connecting to it using the API. So therefore, it's actually you need to add your client into the trusted origin on the NPrinting server for the OnDemand API request. You can do it from here. Again, from the admin, there's the settings. There's on-demand settings. And here you have to add trusted origin. You can just simply click this button. You will fill in the address and give it a name, and done. I have already defined a list of the machines that I trust from the NPrinting server. It will be looking like this. Once you have done this, you can use the on-demand APIs to from the trust origin to call to this NPrinting server. The next thing, and this very important thing, is authorizations. So you need to pay attention that the API user is only able to see or do to the contents that is allowed for him or her. So in the same way, is the NPrinting web console working? So you need to configure the correct security privilege for the user in order for him to perform whatever you want it to perform, right? So how can you do that? You do it through the security roles. In NPrinting, you can enable or disable different actions for a certain group of users using the security roles. You will find the security role configurations from admin and security roles. Here you can see we have already got a list of the security roles. So in NPrinting, there are several predefined security roles there already. And if we look at the administrator, you can see the administrator actually have all the privilege towards all the resources. For the apps, the users, the administrators, administrative tasks, it has all the privilege for everything. But you may want to define what your API user can do on your NPrinting server. Therefore, I have created my own NPrinting user security roles here as API users, I call it. And there I give some privileges to this user security role. For the apps, I see this user cannot do anything to the apps. That's interesting. So let's add this one. So for this user, for this security role, all the users belong to this security role can now see the app group name called app1. And what can they do for the app, for the resources? For the apps, you can view all the apps or view all the connections, filters, publish task can view it. It can reload the metadata. It can view the conditions, view the reports, trigger the published task, etc. So now I want to save my change. And you can do the same for the user and administrative tasks. But I will keep the current privilege for my security role called API users. Okay, so once this security role has been defined, how can you connect that one to your users? You can simply add your users to a specific security role. Here I have a user called API user 1, and I would like to add the role of the API users into it, which I have just updated recently. And then you update the user roles. So now this user 1, API user 1 is having the security roles called API users. Great. So this is the, now let's do some tests to see what kind of difference you can see from these two types of security roles. One, you have the administrator where you can see all of the things. But for this API user, you can only see a certain things, right? Remember before I said that you can use the NPrinting API from any REST tools to invoke them. Here I have a REST tool called Postman. It's quite popular, and it's very helpful for you to do the API troubleshootings when you're doing your programming. And here I have two connections on the same server. On this connection, where I'm using now, is actually logged in as a user administrator. And the other connection to the same machine, if I open up the Postman there, I'm logged in as a local user called local APIs, which have the security role for local users or API users, which we have just configured. So let's have a look on what are the difference you can see from there. So as you remember, in order for you to trigger any API request, you need to first log in. Now I will use the authentication endpoint as to send authentication endpoint. You will see what exactly the NPrinting server will respond to you. This is the response code, and actually this is the HTTP response code, means your authentication successful. Once after that, I want to list all the apps available on the NPrinting server side. I will just send in the GET request for apps. You see how many apps are available for my user, which is administrator, to see. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4 apps available for my user. Okay, cool. Then I will do the same thing on a different user. Remember, this connection is logged in as a different user, which has a different privilege set in the security role. I will do the same thing. I will do the authentication first, passed, good. I will get the apps there. Now you have only one app that's shown to your user or returned to your API call, which names app1. That's because you have configured this user or this security role for this user that is only available to see one app, which is app1 there. So this is about the authorizations. You need to pay attention to that all the time to do everything using the API when you try to interact with the NPrinting server. There's another thing which is not mandatory, but it's good for you to know, and you will need to do them if you want to do the on-demand report for the on-demand report endpoint. That is the on-demand and API report generation checkbox. So let me go back to my NPrinting server, and let me go back to my NPrinting console. So here in the report, if you have a list of reports, under each of those reports, you have a checkbox called Enable On-Demand and API Report Generation. So once you have enabled this flag, you can use the API, the on-demand API calls to create on-demand report against this report. Or you can then you can see this report from the endpoint called /reports in the report level. So you need to pay attention to that. This flag is actually a per report level flag. If you want your API user work towards your report, you will need to enable this flag one by one, report per report. Let's see, for example, for other reports, I have reports with this flag not enabled. We will see what's going to look like later on in the troubleshooting. Okay, so that's it for all the prerequisites. Here I listed all the prerequisites that you need to pay attention when you're working with APIs, and just for you to remember that. And the next, we're going to look at some situations where things might not be working as you expected. I can show you what they look like and how you can get over them. Again, we're going to still use the Postman as a tool for the demonstration. So, for example, I have just mentioned, let's look at if you don't have the on-demand and API enable on-demand and API settings enabled on your report. What would that look like? Right. So if you remember in the report control panel, we have, let's count how many reports we have there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. And now let's use the APIs to check, to list all the report. And that's going to be a report APIs. We have it there already. Okay. Let's send in this get request. Now you see the response returned from NPrinting. It says, okay, the items, we have 1, 2, 3. We have only 3 items returned. So it means 3 report is available for you, for this user to see. Why? The reason is that only 3 of the reports there have this flag checked. The rest is not. So if you want to work with your report on the report level, you will need to have this flag enabled. The next, let's look at one authorization issue. Yeah, we said about the security roles, right? So all the users must be assigned to a certain security roles to get his privilege before he's using the APIs. What if your user doesn't have the privilege or doesn't have enough privilege? What would be the API call look like? Let's have a look. What can we do? We can, we can simply remove the security role from some users, right? So let's remove the security roles from some users. So this is our local API user, and it has a security role called API users. Let's remove that. Okay, so this user doesn't have any security to define his privilege. What's going to look like if you use this user to send in the API call? Oh, we have done some API call. Let's close this one. And let's close this one too. And let's call the postman out again. All right. So see that one. Cool. So now we have a fresh start. We need to start from the authentication, right? Let's do the authentication. Well, you have this error message. That looks interesting. What could that be? Could not get any response. Since you are doing the until-time authentication, that could be. Let's try to access to the NPrinting console. Yeah, you have this warning. So that is actually that is a very good example you are seeing it right now already. So sometimes you will see this error happening is because of the your certificate, your NPrinting certificate is not trusted by your browser. That's simply because I'm using a self-signed certificate from the default NPrinting installations. So you will receive this warning from your web browser and give you further options to do things. But from your REST client or from your code, you might not get this chance. For example, remember we have the simple script created using the JavaScript. Let me just open it again. Already from the console, you see the error message like that. It's .NET net error insecure response. That is pretty clear message say to you, your certificate is not trusted. You need to sort it out that first. So the resolution for you to solve this problem is to you can just simply install a trusted commercial certificate to your NPrinting server. There are a number of articles out there and also even tutorial videos about how you can add a trusted certificate into NPrinting. But for our today's demonstration, there's a workaround. You can simply just go to your browser, visit the NPrinting console, and once you receive this warning for not trusted certificate, you can go and proceed and accept it. You do a little bit differently in different browser, but it's the same concept. So once you have done that, let's go back to the postman and fire off the same authentication request and see what's going to happen this time. Okay, so you have the request coming through and you get the correct response. So it was because of the certificate issue there.
Hey, Yang, we're running a little low on time.
Okay.
You might need to jump ahead to takeaways and start addressing some questions.
Cool. Okay, I will do that. All right, so I think we can stop here for the troubleshooting or the things might go wrong. You may find those information from the developer tool or from the postman address tool here as well. Here I just list different things might go wrong there for you to remember them. And let's summarize today's presentation with some key takeaways. So first, make sure all the prerequisites are fulfilled, right? You will have seen what if you don't. It's very important because it's necessary for you to be able to work with APIs. And the second thing is you can utilize the REST tool for the troubleshooting. It's a very helpful approach to make sure the APIs are actually working. Then you can check your code later on. You can also take a look of examples from Qlik branch. There are a few examples there available, and you might find good ideas there. Then the last but not the least, actually, contact the community or Qlik support if you need help. Yeah, we have got a bunch of questions there. So the first question there is like, how can I use Qlik REST connector to trigger an NPrinting task? That's a very good and interesting question. I know, yeah, you know, that is not a main purpose for the NPrinting APIs to, you know, you can load data from it and put it into the app, Qlik Sense or QlikView app there. But yeah, you can use the REST connector as it's one of the REST client there, right? You can trigger the NPrinting task or you can trigger any NPrinting request there. But there is a limitation currently in the in Qlik Sense versions, the REST connector version of current Qlik Sense, because the NPrinting APIs now require only the NTLM authentication. Once you are able to do the NTLM authentication, the NPrinting server will send you a cookie. You will have to, your client have to receive the cookie, parse it, and formalize it to use for all of your RESTs throughout your REST calls. So you will have to do that manually in the REST connector. And currently in the Qlik Sense, the REST connector in the Qlik Sense version, we have a issue with that. And that issue is going to be fixed if I don't remember exactly, it's a November release or it's a February release 2018. So once that issue has been fixed, you should be able to use REST connector to trigger the NPrinting and API calls and trigger your task there. We will create an article address about this issue when the functionality is there. Does it latest, I have received another question which is very good. Does latest release for our APIs allow support for custom authentication in NPrinting? Yeah, and also there's another change, like there's another question say, what are the changes of the APIs in the 2017 November release? I can answer this two questions together, actually. So one big change from November 2017 release for NPrinting is that its API status has changed from experimental to stable. This simply means that all the APIs are very reliable now, and the breaking change for the APIs from our side is very unlikely. So we're confident to change the status from experimental to stable now. And moreover, there is a deprecation period for all of the APIs in a stable status, which is 6 months. That means if we're going to deprecate any API endpoints from our list, there will be a 6-month overhead for you to prepare your project. So that's a breaking change. Oh, that's a new change from a November 2017 release. And regarding to the question about custom authentication of those APIs, currently, unfortunately for the November release 2017, we still only support NTLM authentication. But based on what I've heard, what I know, there is a roadmap that we are going to include more authentication method in the future API versions. I think the next one most likely will be the JWT authentication. So I hope that answers your question there.
Okay, Yang, we have time for one more.
Okay, let me find one more. How do we get the task execution ID there? So you can do it in your way because that's a your code. But basically, you can find the task execution ID from the task from the post request of your task trigger request. So if you do a post, your base URL slash task and your task ID, you're going to trigger a task execution. So the response for that request will include an ID there in the response, in the first or second object of that. Then that is the ID for the task execution. You're going to need to parse that ID out and paste in your whatever follow-up request to querying the NPrinting server to ask for the status of that execution. So that's how you find the task execution ID and how you monitor your task execution.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for attending and participating. We hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you to Yang for presenting. We always appreciate getting experts like Yang to share with us. We've got a legal disclaimer for you. And next slide is just our thanks. Thanks for everybody and have a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.